We found everything.
Yay, excellent.
Happy we got lost because we left the baby at the therapist and we took our chances. She's there for 2 hours getting therapy. So we went down there and we got a little lost, even though we had the Navi, but oh my goodness, we found everything. I was so happy, especially that piece of lamb. That was a piece of lamb, but I found everything that I needed.
It is hard to find kosher lamb in America. I know it's a shame because I happen to really like lamb, but it's not so popular in this country.
That's true. It's true. Well, my husband eats fish. I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian, but my husband eats fish. So that's the only problem we have. But at least we got the meat, even though we don't eat it, but that's okay.
Right.
Is that okay? We still have to taste the meat.
Yeah, that's still a good part of the activity. Yeah, Israel is the much better place to get your meat.
Okay, but what I'm saying,
which store is this?
Wendy's.
Oh, the Winn-Dixie.
The Winn-Dixie in Fern Park.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. Do we still have to eat that meat? Even though I don't eat meat, I still have to taste it?
No. If you don't eat meat, that's fine.
Okay. I'm still looking for stuff for the little baby because it's hard for me to feed her.
Right.
So she likes her oatmeal, but we can have oats in the house. I gotta find out what I can feed her. But we're looking for stuff. We're looking for kosher stuff for her.
Well, I mean, it depends on exactly how old she is and what she's eating, but I mean, there are non-grain based food, more vegetable type foods, things like that.
Okay.
But if you want, you can always text or we can talk afterwards.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we are going to, jump right in because I do have a 7 o'clock appointment and I want to make sure we have enough time for our class. But before we do, I do need to give 2 little announcements. One, we have been having our power on and off all day because of problems with the construction in the neighborhood. So if the live stream suddenly dies, sorry, it's just because the power went out for a 3rd time today. It's been it's been on and off at least twice already that we know of. So if it goes off a 3rd time, my apologies. It just happened. Don't think there's anything wrong with your side. It's my side. Announcement number 2 is a reminder that we will not be having class next week because it is the evening of Bedikat Chametz, the search for Chametz. It is the last minute cleanup for everything before Passover. So there is no class on Thursday next week. Everyone good?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get down to business today. I wanted to switch from a lot of the ritual talk that we have been having to discussions of the more self-control aspects of Judaism that are everyday occurrences. And in particular, one of the most powerful topics in Judaism is the power of speech, of how we speak to one another. And unfortunately, many of the problems that we have in speaking to one another. So we're going to go through the different commandments along the things we shouldn't be doing with our tongue to one another and how we speak, and see how that can guide us for our regular everyday life, not just holiday occurrences. So Judaism has a vast storehouse of wisdom and discussion of the law regarding different types of speech. And it has a very powerful technical vocabulary. That is to say, the words are used very specifically in a way that common English doesn't. There are specifics in American legal law of what counts as okay and not okay speech, but American law is often, shall we say, very much focused on the nuts and bolts of what can and cannot be taken to court. Judaism recognizes that God did not give us the commandments only with regards to what could and couldn't get us in court, but God gave us the commandments to also guide ourselves even outside of the courtroom. And as such, we have a very rich tradition of analyzing the different types of speech and how we should regulate ourselves. This is the briefest of introductions, and yes, I know it's going to take an hour, but this is the briefest of introductions to this topic, and there is much, much more to be said and to learn than what I will be able to share in this time. But hopefully this will at least give you the framework to recognize that it is not a simple topic, and one that requires a great deal of thought, care, and focus in order to make it through even a day without sometimes tripping on these different problems. So let's get down to the technical terminology, and then we're going to go through each one of these categories in more detail. So the first category is called rechilut, and we're going to use the English word gossip to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about lashon hara, and for the English, we're going to talk in terms of harmful rumors or denigration. It's important to also know that lashon hara sometimes is used as a category word for all types of harmful speech. That's like the casual catch-all phrase for all types of harmful speech in Hebrew. But that is not technically true. Lashon hara has a specific definition. It is not just bad talking. Sheker is the category of lies. Motzi Shem Ra would be the category of slander. And onaat devarim is something we don't have a clear idea of in English, but it is a form of speaking that leaves a subtle harm on the recipient. And we're going to go into all of these in detail. So let's begin with rechilut, which is the most common form of wrongful speech and the one that people tend to give a free pass to. So this is when you share news or information about others. It would generally be considered true. And it's generally thought that when you're saying this, that you're not trying to say anything harmful. That is to say, you are not deliberately saying something in a way that is meant to be mean or meant to be hurtful. You're just sharing information. The example I give on the bottom of the page is, did you hear the Cohens got another dog? Right? Perfectly normal sentence. Doesn't sound like I've done anything wrong. However, the Torah in Leviticus tells us, you shall not go up and down as a gossiper among your people. And our sages say that this type of information is what is being discussed in this passage in Leviticus 19. Now, the issue here is that you may have no ulterior motive. You may have no reason to think that what you are sharing could be at all a problem or be something that, in this case, the Cohens don't want you to share. But the fact remains that you don't know that, and it is not really your place to make that decision on someone else's behalf. We will come back eventually to when you can share information about others. But for the moment, let's work with the sort of general rule that if it's not your business, if it is not about you, and it's about someone else, even if it is true, and even if you think it's not harmful, you still should not be sharing that about someone else without their permission. Now we can begin to imagine how in this situation, the Cohens getting another dog, that maybe if we share it, that could bring them problem. Maybe they're going to have problems with the neighbors, and the neighbors will immediately blame it on the dogs. Maybe there is already a bit of a controversy within the family between Mr. Cohen and Mrs. Cohen about getting another dog, and maybe this is going to exacerbate that stress within their relationship. So there are lots of possible reasons why we shouldn't be sharing this information. So generally speaking, as a rule, if it's someone else's business, not our own personal information, not about us, but about a third party, we should not share it with someone else in conversation, even if it's true and even if we don't mean any harm with it. We're going to come back to some exceptions later, but that is the general rule. Don't talk about other people, no matter how you mean it. Lashon hara. So this is our term denigration or a harmful rumor. And this is saying something that is negative, but also true. We'll talk about if it's a lie in just a second. But lashon hara, technically, according to Jewish law, is when you say something true, but done in a way that is meant to be negative to the person. Now, like I said, in English, we don't have a great word for this. Denigration is kind of okay, but it's not really common in English to separate this, because in English, we have a fixation on if it's true, I should be allowed to say it. If it's true, why are you getting upset that I'm saying it? Why, are you afraid of the truth? And other such aphorisms in American conversations. But Judaism says, well, wait a minute. If you are saying the truth in order to hurt another person and without cause or justification, we will come back to exceptions, but without cause or justification, then no, you are doing something wrong. Not only are you taking that gossip and sharing it like Leviticus 19 said you're not supposed to, but you're not even doing it innocently or accidentally. You are doing it purposefully to cause harm to the other person. So this is covered by Leviticus 19, but it is an even worse violation of the spirit of that particular commandment. So even if what you are saying is true, if you are saying it because you want that information to be out there to hurt the subject of your conversation, then you are violating this commandment, and you need to apologize, fix, and do everything you can to remedy it, or even better, keep your mouth shut. So if you're ever thinking to yourself, I just learned something true and interesting about so-and-so, and you know what, I've been really upset with them, so I'm going to go tell everyone about that, and hey, it's true. No, that is not an appropriate Jewish behavior. Everyone with me so far in the distinction between these? Okay, because now we get to the big change, which is sheker. Sheker means lying, and not like maybe kind of, this is a lie, right? A lie is when you knowingly spread misinformation about a topic or a person. Now, knowingly is important. Judaism does not hold you responsible for making a mistake. If you say to somebody that Pluto is a planet, and you never heard that the astronomers got together and decided that Pluto doesn't count anymore, that's not a lie. That's just a mistake. And of course, when you are informed that they made their decision and poor Pluto lost its special status, then that's okay. You say, oh, I didn't realize. It's fine. You fix it, you understand, and you move on. A lie is when you knowingly are saying something that you believe to be wrong, and you are doing it deliberately so that other people will also believe it to be true. That is what a lie is. And deliberately sharing misinformation with others is absolutely forbidden by the Torah. Exodus 23, keep yourself far away from anything false. Now, this is a little tricky, because sometimes people will think, well, sure, I was lying, but I didn't mean any harm from it. I was just, saying things to make it more exciting. I was exaggerating, or I was joking. And people will often hide behind excuses for why they knowingly lied about a person or about a topic. And although we will eventually come to some exceptions, in general, that is no excuse for saying something that is false. There is almost always a truthful way to answer, or not to speak at all, that is preferred to giving a lie. And again, we're not talking about mistakes, but when you know what you're saying is wrong. So let's just do a quick example at the bottom of the screen. The USA is the biggest country in the world. If you honestly think that the USA is the largest country in the world, either by population or by land, then you're wrong. And that's not a lie, it's just a mistake. On the other hand, if you know that the US is not the largest land or population on Earth, then even if you're not saying it for some nefarious purpose and plot and bad idea, you still should not be deliberately adding misinformation, wrong ideas, bad facts into the general conversation of the world around you. God's seal is truth, and that should be our seal as well. And the fewer lies that we add to the world, the much better the world can be, and the closer it can be to God. In fact, our rabbis teach that God created everything in the world except lies. We made those. That's the uniquely human creation, because everything that God made is true, and we unfortunately have decided to make things that weren't what God made, and they're called lies. So we'll come back to some exceptions, but in general, if it's not true, don't say it, even if you think it's harmless. I can just give you one quick exception, by the way, before we get into the more serious ones. Obviously, this does not prevent fiction. If you want to write a novel or read a novel and it's obviously, Lord of the Rings and people are set in mad and fantasy and dragons and all of that, everybody knows it's fake. Everybody knows it's just made up. You're going to see a new movie and everybody's flying around with superheroes. Sure, no problem. Check to make sure it's a decent movie, but there's no problem. That's not a lie. Everybody knows it's not real. Everybody knows it's just entertainment. Everybody knows it's just fantasy. Of course, that's fine. This is talking about the more hidden form of lies that happen between people. Motzi Shemra is a very specific type of lying where you are giving somebody a bad name. Literally, Motzi Shemra, you are bringing out a bad name. You are labeling them in a way that will create a bad reputation, which harms them in the community and can also harm their livelihood, their business. Now, Lashon hara and rechilut, we said those are true. This is in Motzi Shemra where you are saying a lie, but it is a lie with a particular target, and that is the reputation of the person. So, in fact, this is a combination of Exodus 23 and Leviticus 19, because you are telling tales and you are lying, and of course that makes it even worse. And in English, we might call this slander. For example, I heard Mr. Levy hits his wife. If that's not true, and you're not trying to say, share this with like law officials or other people to help, then that is Motzi Shemra, because of course that's going to harm his reputation. Or if you say, I heard company Q is going bankrupt, if it's not about to go bankrupt and you're not trying to give advice to help people that are about to lose their life savings in the company, then that is definitely a violation of the Torah, because you are damaging that company's business standing. And even if you think it's not significant, it's not really major, it is still a violation. The damage done by our words, it doesn't have to reach a certain threshold of harm. It is more about the intentionality and the possibility of harm being committed. Everyone good on Sheker and Motzi Shemra? Okay, then we're going to move to the most complicated one because it's the most subtle. And I'm sure all of you are aware that the way we talk to one another can often have many different layers of meaning. And the category of ona'at devarim covers that unusual fuzzy ground where what we're saying could be wrong. And it's literally, the concept is wronging somebody with words. But like I said, it has a subtleness to it. Now, this can refer to other types of offenses which harm another. And there's also onat b'mamon, which is when you are harming somebody through cheating them with money. But in this particular case, it is where you are harming somebody in a way that only you really know whether it was meant as harm or not. It's something that could never be proven in a court that you've actually done it. A lie can be proven, a negative attitude in Lashon hara can be proven, slander can be proven. This could never reach the level of a court because it is so subtle. And indeed, from Leviticus 25, we know when you sell property to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. This is not just talking about not lying or cheating, but it is talking about the more subtle forms of taking advantage of a person. And this goes beyond financial issues, but also taking advantage in conversation, in speech. So this needs a little bit more information. And thankfully, the Talmud gives us a lot more information because it considers this a very serious problem. So here is the sort of case study of this problem from the Talmud's point of view. If somebody is a convert and comes to learn Torah, right? So somebody has become Jewish and now they are coming to the class and they're going to learn Torah. Do not say to him, shall a mouth that ate forbidden foods, abominable and creeping things, now come and study Torah, which was uttered by the mouth of God himself. It sounds like it could be a compliment of, wow, look at you, you've come so far. You used to be the kind of person that sat around eating bugs like all the other, people in the world, but now you're studying Torah. Boy, you've really improved. Yes, it's a compliment, but it is also a compliment which comes with the baggage of deliberately reminding a person of a negative part of their background that they probably don't want to be reminded of, but you're doing so in such a way that it is not obvious that that was your intention. And so the person has no easy defense against your behavior. And even the others who are there, who are hearing it, don't have an easy way to chastise you for what you are doing. Unless they've been studying Talmud, in which case somebody will take you aside and say, that's not the way we talk to people. Another example, if someone suffers afflictions of disease or has buried his children, meaning has, God forbid, outlived their children, do not say to him, as Job's companions told him, is not your fear of God your confidence, and your hope the integrity of your ways? Remember now, who was that, who that was innocent ever perished? So if you haven't studied the book of Job, please go back and study it and read past the first few chapters, because it is a masterclass in how not to help somebody during a time of crisis. Because his so-called friends show up and they give him advice and comfort, but all of their advice and comfort basically blames him for the problems that he is now suffering. And this is that same sort of false comfort. They are putting their arm around the person who is having this trouble and saying, well, you know, God is always just, so if you're suffering, you probably deserve it. So doesn't that make you feel better that your suffering is part of God's justice? No, that doesn't make me feel better. And like we know from the story of Job, we know that not everyone who suffers is suffering because God is punishing them for a wrongdoing. After all, Job, we were told multiple times, was a blameless man. So to take it upon ourselves to read into their problems some form of moral lesson against them is a terrible way to behave. Again, another example, if donkey drivers sought grain from a person, he should not say, go to so-and-so and who sells grain, knowing that the person has never sold any. You're giving wrong directions. You're giving deliberately incorrect advice to somebody. Now you could always say, oh, I'm sorry, I was mistaken, I thought he did. But here you are leading them astray without any obvious reason or gain for what you might be doing, but doing it in a way that is definitely harmful to the other person, but it is a very subtle form of harm. Rabbi Yehuda goes on to say, one may also not pretend to be interested in a purchase when he has no money, since this is known only to the heart, and of everything known only to the heart, it is written, and you shall fear your God. So he reminds us that if you walk into a shop, you need to be at least potentially able to be a customer. You do not go to the car dealership and take a free test drive. You do not go to the Best Buy and look at all the TVs, knowing you're going to buy them at Amazon. You have to at least potentially be able to buy from that place. But doing it otherwise is an act of subtle misleading to the salespeople, to the business people whom are serving you. It's a misuse of their facilities. And since you're the only one who technically knows whether or not you actually could or wouldn't buy from that person, it is up to you and your heart to be true, because there is one other that knows whether you have any true intentions, and that's God. So between you and God, this will be handled if you are unfortunately taking advantage of that other person. Questions or comments on this? Okay, moving on. Now, there are other types of behaviors that are even less explicitly prohibited by the Torah, but are nonetheless problems that we should be careful of when we are speaking. And they're generally lumped under what we call avak lashon hara, the dust of lashon hara. Just as dust is not the actual thing, but the small bits that are falling off of it, so too these actions are not actual lashon hara, but they are so similar that we have to be careful. What is this, says Rambam? If one says, you should stay like you are now, or he says, don't ask me about him, I don't want to say what happened, or anyone who praises his friend in front of those that hate him, has spoken avak lashon hara, since this causes them to speak negatively of him. So this is a way of you're not saying something wrong, but you're creating an impression that something is wrong, or you're going to prompt others to say something wrong. So in the first case, you should stay like you are now, can often be misleading to a person. Saying, I don't want to talk about it, is also giving them a hint that there's something wrong, but in fact, there may be nothing. And even though you said nothing explicitly, it's still damaging to the victim of your topic. And then the last case, of course, is you are deliberately laying a trap for the enemy of that person to tell you all the bad things they want to tell you about the person that you're praising. So all of these are also things that we are careful of and do not engage in. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute. I've been hanging around with Jewish people, and Jewish people do all of these things. Right? I know Jews who gossip. I know Jews who say bad things. I know people who lie. I know people who do all of these things. And yes, I also know people that speed. I have met people that have bragged about cheating on their taxes. I know kids when I was growing up who would shoplift. That doesn't mean those activities are right. And it doesn't mean that those activities are approved of. And these matters of our speech are some of the hardest commandments for people to consistently and reliably obey. Most people, for most of their life, have really no trouble not murdering another person. The impulse may flare up in them at one point or another. Not everyone, please don't get the wrong idea. Most people are not prone to that type of violence. But the vast majority of humanity never even gets close to murder. Gossip, on the other hand, has happened to almost everyone at least once, more likely beyond. Because we are social people, we do want to share, we do want to talk, we do want to engage in that mutual exchange that is so important to the feeling of connectedness. The problem is that many of the topics which are most interesting to many people are the topics that we should be talking about the least. There are many other wonderful things that can be talked about that don't involve naming other people and giving information that should not be shared. So yes, unfortunately, many people still violate all of these. That does not make them acceptable. It just means we have to be even more on guard, because prohibiting them is for very good reasons. We're going to go through a few texts that talk about why these are prohibited and how we should think about them in order to strengthen ourselves to prevent it. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, says Proverbs, and they that indulge it shall eat the fruit thereof. Meaning, if you engage in your life as a gossip and as somebody who is a slanderer, eventually that will come back on you as well. Also from Psalms in the Tanakh, who is the man who desires life, who loves days of seeing good? Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. If you want to know the key to a good life, one of the most important things to do is guarding how we speak. Come on, there we go. Additionally, as we saw in Leviticus, the idea about not going around as a gossiper, the great commentator Rashi adds, I say that since all those who start quarrels and speak Lashon Hara go into homes to seek what evil they can see or what evil things to tell in the marketplace, they are the same as those who go about spying. So Rashi points out that in order to be a gossiper, if that is what you are going to do, you literally have to go around to collect the information that you plan to share with other people. And if you were doing that on behalf of a government, we would call you a spy. And why do you think that spying for social damage is somehow more acceptable than spying for national damage? So just as you would not betray your country by sharing its secrets to foreign adversaries, so too we should not be going around collecting information and secrets that we would share to the damage and suffering of our neighbors, friends, colleagues, families, or others. Proverbs again shows how seriously our tradition takes this. These 6 are hated by the Lord, and the 7th is the abomination of his soul, a standard phrasing of hyperbole to get your attention and focus on this as being serious. haughty eyes, meaning being arrogant, a false tongue, lying, and hands spilling innocent blood, murder, a heart plotting vain thoughts when you are scheming against others, feet hastening to run to evil when you don't even hesitate before you break a commandment, a false witness spouting lies in court, and the inciter of strife among siblings, one who causes anger between people. And the usual way of causing that anger is precisely through gossip and lashon hara. So all of these, as you can see, are lumped together as being terrible behaviors, but one of them seems to be a little different, which is the spilling of innocent blood. And indeed, that is something that the rabbis were going to pick up on, of how important this is. And we go back into our teachings from Rambam, from Mishnah Torah, and he explains to us, think about what happened to Miriam, who spoke about her younger brother, for whom she had risked her life to save from the Nile. She didn't even speak negatively about him, other than to compare him to other prophets. This is looking at the story in the book of Numbers about Moses's Cushite wife and the fallout from Miriam's misspeaking. Moses himself doesn't even mind in that episode, it seems. She was still punished with Sara'at, and all the more so for other wicked and foolish people who speak all types of haughty and pompous words. Anyone who wishes to improve should stay away from such people. So even Miriam, who thought she was doing something fine, but really had no business speaking about Moses's wife and his relationship with her, was punished. All the more people who don't have Miriam's standing, who don't have her righteousness, should be even more on guard, because if she would be punished for that type of behavior, obviously so would the rest of us. And indeed, the rabbis then take all of these teachings and bring them together to say, the rabbi said 3 sins are punished in this world, and the sinner loses his place in the world to come, hinting that their deeds are so bad that not only are they punished, but they are cut off from a life after death: idolatry, incest, and bloodshed. The 3 that you might expect. And lashon hara is equivalent to all of them. Now, is lashon hara literally the same as murder? Is one person who gossips the same as a person who murders? No, not literally and not technically, but metaphorically, the rabbis wanted to make sure that a person would defend themselves, keep themselves far from committing lashon hara, the same way they would keep themselves far from idolatry, incest, and violence. They needed a way to highlight the severity of this problem, because it is one of the problems that bedevils a society and creates so much strife within the society. Indeed, idolatry and God forbid incest and bloodshed are often easier to fix than a society or community that has been destroyed through gossip. Which is why, furthermore, the rabbi said, lashon hara kills 3 people: the speaker, the receiver, and the one spoken about. And the receiver more than the speaker. That is to say that a person who allows themselves to hear the lashon hara is in some ways going to be more harmed by this exchange. The speaker, after all, already knows and has their opinion. The speaker, after all, has already decided that they would like to violate this. The listener is not innocent if they allow that person to continue, but instead is contributing. They are aiding and abetting this act of transgression, and they are allowing themselves to be influenced and changed by permitting these words to come to them. Which is why if somebody is engaging in lashon hara in front of you, it is your obligation to say, I'm sorry, but that sounds, a bit like gossip. Maybe we should talk about something else. It's one of the hardest things to say in a conversation because other people will feel judged, but take some resolution. If they are unwilling to be judged in the conversation, then why are they talking about someone else not there without having them be in their presence? Because they are afraid of being judged. And if you judge them, if you tell them that this is lashon hara, and so we are not going to continue this conversation, you are reminding them that they knew that this was not something that they should be doing, or else they would be doing it in front of the subject of the conversation. If you're speaking behind someone's back, then you already know that you should not be saying it, or else you'd be speaking to their face. So do not be afraid of reminding a person of that and saying, if so-and-so is not here, I don't think we should talk about them. It is exactly what they are afraid you're going to say, and they will back down. And one of the most important things to bear in mind is that when we have committed Lashon Hara, we may wonder, how can we fix that act? What is the tikkun? What is the methodology for fixing it? And there is no tikkun. There is no way to fix Lashon Hara. The difficulty with speech is that unlike a bruise or unlike cheating somebody in business, there is no medicine that can be used. There is no fine that can be paid that will repair all of the damage that was done. You can heal a broken bone. You can repay a amount that was stolen. But when somebody's reputation has been damaged, it is impossible to know how far the damage has spread and how much damage was done. And even if you regret it and eventually wish to fix it, tracking down every last repercussion and chain of transmission is impossible. And so really the only thing to do is to avoid doing it in the first place. And then yes, try hard if you have done it to fix it. But this is really meant to focus us on not committing the problem, even when it is still just an idea in our mind. All right, so I'm going to take a quick drink before we get into some exceptions. This is a great time for you to ask questions or make comments if you would like. All right, so far the power is still holding out for me, so that's good. Again, for those
Okay.
who joined a bit late, we have been having power outages here at the Neely House.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
What do you do if you're in a group, not at the synagogue, you're in college or you're in high school, or and someone starts spreading gossip and or calling other people who are different races or ethnic groups? Do you just stand there, or do you walk away, or do you confront them and say that is not true? What is
So-
our obligation to the community at large to make sure that? Okay, go ahead.
No, our obligation is unending. So standing there is never an option. The rabbis have as a general rule that if a person is present when an act is being committed and they do not object, then that is the same as if they approved of the act explicitly. So if somebody, to use your example, is making a racial slur or insulting other nationalities and you say nothing, then you might as well have said that yourself. It's not like, well, I didn't say it or deny it, so I'm neutral. If you say
Right.
nothing, you are an ally of the person spreading hate. So standing there is never an option. In some cases where we might be powerless, depending upon the country, the time period, the situation, the relationship, walking away may be the only option we have. But thankfully, in most of our situations these days, there are means to, first of all, speak up and say, I really think that's inappropriate and I do not appreciate that type of conversation. And if the person is able to dominate the conversation and keep the group on their side, then walking away becomes important and an essential part of distancing yourself from that. But very often, other people in the group are also uncomfortable. They're just more uncomfortable with confronting what's being said. And once one person speaks up, others will usually rally around that and say, yes, you know what, we shouldn't be talking about it this way. The hardest category, because straight up lies and hate are usually able to be shot down once a person has the courage to speak up. The hardest category is rechilut, is general gossip, like we're about to look at some exceptions to, because so many people cannot imagine what's the harm of talking about another person if you don't mean anything ill by it, if you don't mean them any harm. And that really is something that we have to expand our understanding of, that talking about another person when they're not there, which doesn't fit one of these exceptions that we're going to be discussing, is a way that spreads the potential. Now, unfortunately, thanks to COVID-19, I've got a much better analogy for it, which is, the transmission of a virus doesn't mean that you or even the person you transmit it to get sick, or that you mean for them to get sick. And you and they may stay fine and healthy, but by you not taking the proper precautions and you breathing it on them and them standing around inhaling it, it's now creating more opportunities for that virus to spread. And when it comes to gossip, if there are things you shouldn't be talking about, even if you're fine and the person you're talking to is fine, you have now multiplied the opportunities for something to go wrong with what you are sharing. It may not happen with you, it may not happen with the other person, but it might happen with the person they talk to, or the person that person's talks to. And we are responsible for that chain of transmission. And so we need to draw a line and cut it off. But that, like I said, is a much harder thing. And in many cases, when you have a group that is not willing to listen to that level of precaution, then simply excusing yourself from that conversation for a while is the best option. But let's talk a little bit about some of the exceptions, because as you'll see, there are times when we can, or indeed must, speak up. So the Chofetz Chaim is considered to be one of the greatest writers of this topic. He's not the only voice, and by no means are his interpretations the only interpretations that are valid, but it is a great place to start the study of this topic. And as he explains, for the real concern of the Torah in forbidding evil talk, even when true, was the evil intent involved in wishing to disgrace our fellow and enjoy his discomfiture. And so that is the root, according to his intention, his interpretation, that our intention is very, very important, which would seem to imply that there are occasions where if our intention is pure, that we are allowed to speak about another person, even if they're not present. But as you're going to see, the standard is very, very high. The idea would be, if the information is said for constructive purposes, right, not to harm a person, but only to help, and it meets the following conditions, then it can be shared. Right? The information can be seen by the speaker or is known by the speaker to be true. Not, I heard somebody tell somebody that somebody told me, but you had to either be firsthand witness or you have to know it from an infallible source. So the information has to be true. Truth is something that is number one as an option. As soon as it is in doubt or as soon as it is a lie, then you keep your mouth shut unless it is a criminal action, in which case you can talk to the authorities and allow them to do an investigation. And sorry, I should point that out as a general exception for any of the different issues here. In terms of sharing information, you are absolutely allowed and required to share information with lawful authorities if there is any danger to the subject of your conversation or others from the subject of the conversation. If you know that a person is having trouble, or you even suspect they're having trouble that could hurt them or others, you are obligated to report that in a way that can get them help and prevent the harm they might cause. Part two, the information cannot be exaggerated. And boy, do we love to exaggerate. We exaggerate 1,000,000 times a day. That's an example. I think exaggeration is sort of the bread and butter of how we like to make our stories and conversation more exciting. But if you know you're already stepping up to the line of whether I should be saying this or not, then you have to always make sure that you are absolutely not exaggerating it when you do. 3, the speaker should be sure that the news breaks Jewish law, which is to say, if you are sharing information about someone else, you have to make sure that the reason you're sharing it is because what they have done is an actual violation of the Torah. If they have bought the ugliest polyester drapes that you've ever seen, that is not a violation of Jewish law, it's just bad taste. And that is not a reason to go tell someone else about what you saw. If, on the other hand, you know that they are harming their animals, that's a violation of Jewish law, that absolutely you can share with someone else for constructive purposes. Remember up at the top. And we're going to continue to see how that builds. The speaker must have pure intentions. They cannot be saying this for anything else than to remedy the situation and help the person they are talking about. The speaker should first go to the sinner before speaking about him. Use the example, you see somebody not feeding their animals and you know that's wrong, and you've seen them not feed, you've seen the suffering the animal's going through. Your first obligation is to say, you know, I've noticed that your dog is getting awfully thin. Is it sick? Is there anything I can do to help you take care of it? Maybe I could take him to the vet. You have to begin by trying to work with that person so that the issue is private and see if there is resolution. Only if that fails do you then move on to other people. If the purpose can be achieved in a way other than speaking, that should be tried first. Meaning if you can solve the problem without talking to another person about someone else, then you follow that additional solution, whatever that might be. And number 7, the speaking should not cause more damage to the subject than would have been decreed in a court. So for example, if you believe the person or if you know the person has been guilty of stealing $5 from the cash register at work, a Jewish court is not going to penalize that person with years of imprisonment, and thus you may not have an obligation to share that information if you know that the punishment they will have is to be sent to Siberia. This is not such an issue in the United States, where our laws are generally fair and able to be at least appealed if there is a miscarriage of justice. But in many other times in our history and many places still on earth today, this is a much more difficult consideration because punishments can be so uneven and unfair. And certainly during the days of Chafetz Chaim in the 19th century, this was a major concern. Now, when it comes to lying itself, you might think, I'm never allowed to lie. Well, yes and no. In general, you're absolutely right. Lying, as I said, we shouldn't be doing it, but there are 4 categories when lying can be permitted. Doesn't mean we should rush to do it, doesn't mean it's the best option, but there are times when it is the best option for peace, for privacy, to avoid embarrassment, and to avoid undue trouble to others. So, quick examples. Peace. One may lie in order to reconcile husband and wife, friends, siblings, or others who are fighting. Such lies should only be aimed at restoring peace and not giving advantage to anyone in the fight. So the classic example of, I was talking to so-and-so, and I'm sure they would like to see you again so that you can try and settle your differences. And you tell the other person the same, but so each one thinks the other one is interested. It can sometimes open the door. Doesn't always work. You have to be very careful and know the relationship very well, but it is possible. There are opportunities where a little softening can occasionally make it easier for people to move from their positions and come back together again for peace. Very, very careful, very delicate, should not be your first option. Avoiding lies, you should avoid a lie if possible, because restoring a peace with the lie does run a risk that it will fall apart. But if that is your only intention, is to restore peace, then in some circumstances it can work. Privacy. One may lie to avoid revealing private life, your own private life to others, such as when asked if you are pregnant, you may say no, even if you are, to keep people from knowing your personal affairs. You are not under obligation in normal conversation to share every piece of your private life with anyone who asks. And if you are confident that the person is not going to stop asking, or that the person will misunderstand your evasion, you are allowed to lie to get them to shut up and leave you alone. So if they want to know, hey, are you pregnant? And you know that if you say, well, we're not sure yet, or well, we're not really trying, if you're saying anything other than no, that they are going to run next door and start telling everybody that you are, and you don't want that news to be out there. And there are lots of good reasons why a person would not want their status to be shared. and even if there aren't good reasons, it's your own private business, and you don't need to give a reason why you don't want to share it. But some people will not take that for an answer. You are allowed to deceive them to get them to leave your private life alone. Again, it's always best if you can avoid giving a lie, but sometimes some people make it impossible to avoid. Embarrassment. One may lie to avoid embarrassing another person. If asked where someone is, you may say that they are at some event rather than say they are home with an embarrassing problem. One may omit embarrassing details when discussing someone's past. This is perfectly fine. We're talking about embarrassment here, not danger. So if the person is a convicted sex offender, for example, and someone asks whether or not so-and-so is a convicted sex offender, and they are worried because they want to hire them in a capacity where they might be putting others in danger, then you have an obligation to say the truth. On the other hand, if they want to know that when they were young, they used to engage in some form of silly or embarrassing hobby or habit, which they have long since given up and has no bearing on their current life or their current character, then absolutely you are allowed to avoid sharing those details with someone else for the sake of sparing that person any additional embarrassment from that past or present activity. And on that idea of sparing embarrassment, there is a very famous discussion in the Talmud between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, two of the great academies of the Mishnahist period. Beit Shammai says that one recites praise of the bride as she is, meaning if she's pretty, you say she's pretty. If she's not pretty, you don't say she's pretty. You say something else. And Beit Hillel says one recites a fair and attractive bride, meaning you read a formula. Regardless of how fair and attractive she is, you call every bride fair and attractive. Beit Shammai said to Beit Hillel, in a case where she was lame or blind, which were considered to be unattractive in the ancient world, does one say to her, a fair and attractive bride? Are you going to lie? But the Torah says, keep you far from a false matter. Beit Hillel said to Beit Shammai, according to your statement with regard to one who bought something poorly made from the market, should another praise it and increase its value in his eyes, or insult it and reduce its value in his eyes? Meaning, in general, not just with regards to getting married, in general, if your friend says, hey, what do you think of this painting I bought? And it's not a great painting, you generally, build it up and say, yeah, that's very nice. I'm glad you found a painting you like. You're absolutely, that's going to look great in your house. You absolutely can be very complimentary to something that that person enjoys, even if you personally don't find it so great. That is absolutely fine. However, this is in a case, again, where we are trying to spare embarrassment. If the person says, hey, I bought a Picasso, and you, because you're an art expert, know it's not a Picasso, then you do have an obligation to help them get a refund for whatever they pay. So from here, the sages said, a person's disposition should always be empathetic with humanity. You need to feel and think about other people's feelings. Don't just say, I am a robot, I only speak the truth, and if it makes you cry, so be it. There is a time where truth will hurt people, and you do need to say it nonetheless. But there are many times where the truth is not your only option, and you should be considerate of others' feelings. And just one more example, one may lie to avoid causing unnecessary trouble to others, such as saying the food was fine to prevent hosts from making more, or saying you don't need a ride because the person you are speaking to will miss an important event if they help you. If someone says, do you need a lift to the airport? And you say, and if you say yes, they are absolutely going to be there at 5 a.m. helping you with your suitcase, get to the airport, but they're going to miss a very important thing that matters to them. Letting them know that you've got it covered, even if you don't yet have alternative plans, is perfectly fine, and is in fact a considerate act on your part to spare them from their trouble. Now, again, you'll notice that the line here is for their benefit, not yours. And therefore, you don't lie because it makes you have less trouble. you lie to save them from having trouble. Again, all of these exceptions are exceptions, and if you find yourself using these as excuses to lie more and more, you're doing it wrong. These should only be used in the most special and rare cases. These should not become your everyday occurrences of, oh, well, I don't want to cause undue trouble, so I'm going to lie. That should not be your automatic response. It should be only used in emergencies. So let me just give a summary before I round this off and then run to my next meeting. Well, click on a different button. From Ramban, very famously, he said, it is possible that one could be a scoundrel with the full permission of the Torah, meaning you could still have technically fulfilled the Torah and not be a nice person, as long as he didn't violate specific commandments. He could be drunken, gluttonous, crass, and speak all sorts of vile things. Technically, you can do all of those things without quite breaking the commandments. So, after giving the details of those things that are prohibited, the Torah now gives a general command to be holy. Taken from Leviticus 19, speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy for the Lord your God, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. The idea being that, yes, there are many rules and many limits, but even if you feel that you could say something within the limits of the law, but doing so would be mean, doing so would be cruel, doing so would be a definite bad character trait, then you should strive to follow that higher commandment and keep yourself away from that behavior. Speech is one of the hardest things to regulate. It is even harder than controlling what we eat, but it is something that gives us a very important key to a much better life, because you will find that a huge number of the problems and issues that are created in your life and the community around you are caused by what you say and by what others say. And if we were all to work just a little bit harder on this topic, I think we would be amazed at how quickly many of the long-standing problems begin to disappear. Any last questions or comments? While I wait for people to unmute, just a reminder that next week, because of the imminent holiday of Passover, we will not be having the Pathway to Judaism class on Thursday. Next week, on Thursday, there is no class. All right, then that's all for today. Everybody, please take care and stay safe. And since I won't see this class before Passover, Chag Sameach, have a wonderful time. Enjoy your Passover. If you have any last-minute questions, feel free to call, text, or email me, and I'll be more than happy to help you in any way I can before the holiday happens. Take care, everyone, and be well.
Thank you. Thank you.